Tom Burton,
16.
and I'm 16, sweet 16.
Wow. Wow.
And yeah, I'm Tom Burton, and I'm here with Brandon Lee. And we have a guest today, but our guest looks remarkably
He
a lot
looks
like
familiar.
our other. It must be a twin brother or something. That's the only thing I can think of. I mean, it's remarkable. Pardon?
I said, poor guy. Anybody that's would be a twin brother of mine.
Hey, real quick, before we jump in, sorry to cut you off, Tom. Did you guys see that? There's an article or a thing on these two baseball players. They're both in the minor leagues. They have the exact same name, and they look almost exactly alike, and they're not related. They did a DNA test. They look that much alike.
I missed that.
Nobody saw it. I'll have to pull it out and put it in there.
I haven't seen that. But I do remember the Canseco brothers back in my day. So,
yeah. Makes me think of juicing it up.
So
anyway, sorry to take us off on a tangent.
That's okay. But so welcome, Carson, as our guest today. And we don't talk a lot about what we do. I realize that, and kind of listening to past episodes, right? We come on and we get right down to business on the subject, and probably people out there are like, who are these people and what do they do and why are they talking about social? So today, Carson, as our guest, I think it would be great to kind of start off and tell everybody a little bit about what you do, your background, your role at Microsoft, and all of that. And then we can kind of jump in. We're going to talk today about how you have gone about, and I know from listening even to the last podcast, right, is transitioning from, an individual contributor into a leader and building a social selling team. So I don't know, I'm excited about it. I'm really interested to kind of hear this, and welcome everybody who is coming on. Colby, welcome. And please feel free to jump in with your questions and so forth. So Carson, tell us.
Hey, Colby.
Hey, Colby. Yeah, this is fun. It's fascinating as well. I mean, you really hit on the key element is, how social selling can and has played a role over the years and as the tools have evolved, but also making the transition into a leader. And I'll talk about that journey. But, really, so my role today, I'm a director in the enterprise healthcare space at Microsoft. And I'm also the social selling lead for all of Microsoft Healthcare US. And that was a formalized piece that was really built into my role as a result of just some of the work that I had been doing and the evangelism that I'd done around the benefits of social selling. So I think it's a great story as we all think about, some of the topics that we talked about before, like how do you sell yourself on social selling? How do you sell your leadership on the benefits of social selling? And then how do you evangelize it broadly in building a team? So that is my role today. I've been with Microsoft for just shy of 9 years, and I've been in a few different roles, but it is my longest tenure of any company that I've worked for.
Is social selling lead an actual title that is in Microsoft now? I mean, is that actually a formal role or sort of an informal role?
It's an informal role, but it was a formal piece that was built into my role about 2 years ago now. And that was really just due to the support of my leadership, very forward thinking, very much seeing, how leveraging these digital tools and assets were creating relationships that we needed, and how they were leading to strategic partnerships. Right. So it's been a long journey, but no, it's not a formal title, but it is a formal part of my role.
Interesting. And in your 9 years, when did you transition from more of an individual contributor to a team lead? Is that more recent, or how does that fit into the journey?
Yeah, good question. So it's funny because I actually had the majority of my career experience had been in leadership prior to coming to Microsoft. And so when I started here, I was kind of a player coach. It was a new role that had been formed in what was our retail and Microsoft stores channel. But I led a business team and then was responsible for all the business related sales results, right? So it's kind of a player coach because I also carried my own quota. And then after that, I moved into the corporate space as an account executive. And I spent a few years doing that. And I'm so glad I did. It was very valuable experience to really carry that bag and understand that role because it gave me credibility, but also understanding whenever I moved into a director role that I have today. So I've got a team of sellers and technical specialists that work supporting healthcare clients across the country.
Oh, well, so it's a national team that is covering
Yes.
the vertical that you're in. Awesome.
Correct.
So, yeah. So how did that transition from, I guess, or when did, you mentioned some of one of the previous shows, right? Is that even some of the KPIs and some of the things that you're tracking as a team, where do you think that where did it start to transition to more of a, I guess, a social selling team versus just what people would think of as a traditional sales team of, account executives and so forth?
Yeah, love the question. So I'll say first off, the enterprise selling structure that we have is one of collaboration, right? So even as an individual contributor, I was very blessed and fortunate to have a number of specialists that I was working with across different solution areas and across just about anything that we would need to get accomplished. So while, I would own the all-up relationship with the customer, I was working as part of a very high functioning, high caliber team. Now, when you make the move, from an individual contributor standpoint, I was very successful. And I think, when you make the move to leadership, you've got to be very intentional about two things. Number one, it's not about being the hero anymore. It's about being the hero maker. How do I empower and enable my team to be successful? And I come with a very different style and, background than a lot of prototypical enterprise sellers or cloud sellers or SaaS sellers. I have zero technology background. So for me, it was all about the things that we've talked about on this show. It was, how do I build a community around what we do? How do I go out and find some of these executive relationships that we don't inherit or have historically? And so I chose using LinkedIn, using some of our marketing cues, following up really diligently with some of our CRM leads that we inherited, building newsletters, building webinars, building community around what we did. And it worked. But when you move into another role and you're in a leadership position, the key element there is understanding, I got to meet everybody where they are. And I'm very fortunate today. I've got a team of absolute rock stars. So on paper, and at first, when I was taking a look at this team, I'm asking myself, like, okay, the way that I can help some of these folks wasn't necessarily completely obvious out of the gates. What I love doing is sitting with them and strategizing, on the go-to-market strategy, the day-to-day, the pipeline creation, the relationship creation, the deal creation, the strategy, et cetera. So, from the second part of that lens was, where my manager started to take me from a coaching perspective was, okay, you've got this great brand, right? You're the top social seller in the company, but what does that mean from a leadership perspective? It means nothing. And how do you transform that and parlay that into being a social selling leader and getting your team to adopt and understand these things and how they can leverage it? Because you can't just go out and social sell and, be a driver and be the seller with every single opportunity. God knows I tried at first. But, in all seriousness, that was the key element, was how could I understand everyone's style, understand what mattered most, because a big part of it is building a team culture and fostering and stoking that, being transparent and communicative as a leader, digging in and understand what are their priorities, getting your team promoted and getting your team in more opportunities to win, getting them more at bats. And so I, slowly started to really showcase some of the things and some of the ideas that I had, ways that we can incorporate social selling, but I made sure that they were a part of every single initiative, every single campaign we would run. I would get the feedback from them. We would monitor it together. We would track it together. And when you start having successes, there's no better way to, give a big thumbs up to, like, hey, this is working, than when you start to have successes and everybody sees it.
So Carson, that's really, thank you for sharing all that. It's really great to understand that holistically. What does that mean on a practical kind of day to day? So you've said things like get everybody involved in campaigns so that they can participate, showing them how to do social selling as part of their overall role. Like, what can you get into the tangible? I know one of the things that I hear about our show a lot is they like the practical side. I mean, I get a lot of people that go, I loved how practical that was. It helped me. So could you get into that granular a little bit and tell us, like, what does that mean? How do you introduce and get somebody started with social selling? Especially, you mentioned earlier, like you came at this from a totally different background versus like you'd never sold tech before, you never sold software before. And I think I have an idea what that means from, tech and software sales, BDR type of model to what you're doing, but I don't fully get it. Can you kind of flesh all that out into practical terms? Sorry, I asked a question, then I asked like 3 or 4 more to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, Brandon, it's a great question and series of questions. I mean, because I think it really comes down to at the beginning, and as a leader, you never want to just come in and start saying, "Hey, do it this way, do that." I needed to understand everybody's unique style and kind of their why and what really mattered to them. But a lot of them they came in with a preconceived notion probably about me too, because of the my style and what I was known for. And I had done presentations, right? I mean, we've talked about this on previous shows. Because of some of the successes that my team and I had been having previously, I was being asked to present, and it was, in smaller groups, and then it was larger groups, and it was regionally, nationally, and globally. I mean, I presented in 11 countries now within our organization on different social selling tools and mechanisms and processes. And I'm baked into some of our corporate training now. And so it's, I think a lot of folks probably had a preconceived notion around that piece, but collaboration is key. And so a lot of it might be an example of I would be on a team call, right? So my team, the people that report to me, they will have their own extended team calls that they'll run, and they'll bring everybody in that supports that group of customers, and they'll talk about state of the state, right? So they'll walk through what's top of mind, what's pressing, where are we stuck, where might we need to create and nurture a relationship. And so, start bringing in ideas here and there. Like it could be a personality profile. It could be a story, maybe something where I'd encountered something very similar, something that I've done leveraging social selling to unlock a relationship and a win in my career. And so it's just, you just try to find those little areas where you can nudge and influence based on that, and just being part of the team, part of the solution, part of the strategy. Another big part was really building a foundation for this. So we built out a shared file that was in Excel and was on a spreadsheet that we could all access. And when I say all, I mean, there's like 65 people that day to day, touch all of our customers. So we would just share this file out. Everybody had carte blanche to leverage this. And a lot of it was information that we would need to be accessing on a daily basis. I mean, the goal was to create a tool that everybody would be living in. And this is where our social selling strategy was housed.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, and how did that relate to social?
Yeah, this is where the social selling strategy was housed. So when we would build campaigns, and we still build them today. In fact, I built one with the team this week. About
what do you mean, Carson, when you say a campaign? What's involved in a campaign?
Yeah. So thinking about target audience, and look, I work for a very dynamic organization with a robust marketing team. We have a lot of collateral and materials, but like, I'll give you an example. If we have a new solution that comes out, typically that is going to fit into the purview of a very specific title at a customer organization. Could be a CIO, could be a CFO, could be a VP of sales. But you want to understand who's the audience. Who do I ultimately want to create the relationship with and engage and stay top of mind with? And then the other element would be, what's the material? What's the collateral? And then lastly, it's what are the mediums? How do I want to leverage this? And so we'll track all these. We've talked about webinars that we've done. I'm building a webinar currently with someone who has a very prominent role in our healthcare channel. And so understanding like who are the resources that are going to deliver this, and I can track all the webinars that we do. I can track who they were sent to. I track all of our leads there. And then, once you execute, then you can also track, okay, who showed up to the webinar? How many follow-ups did we have? And then we can react and respond as a result, because the key element is, okay, if I know that I got 5 people on this webinar, but I got 500 on this other webinar, I need to probably gravitate towards something that's going to lean toward the latter. And so we can be very informed about what strategy is working and what's not. But what I found works the best here, Brandon, is having something that we're all collaborating on. What are the plays that should be top of mind? What are the campaigns that should be top of mind? What messaging are we trying to deliver? Who are we going after? And then let's put it all out there for everybody to see and to leverage in creating these campaigns, executing these campaigns, and learning from these campaigns.
So I think what you're saying, Carson and Brandon, I think this fits perfectly right with some of the questions we get about social selling. And what you're talking about there, Carson, is not per se social selling. Excuse me, it's virtual selling, right? And you're looking at the three legs of the stool are: what content do I have? What audience am I going to? And through what channel, right? You're looking at those three, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're looking at those three pieces and then working out your strategy accordingly with your team. So to your point on the webinar, if I have a webinar, I know that webinar is designed for VP of whatever or senior level management. And then we're going to go and we're going to introduce that webinar through LinkedIn, but we could also do it through email. We could do it through whatever different channels that we're doing, right? But we're really taking a much more broader approach than, hey, this is just something I'm doing through LinkedIn at that point. So
yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, it's having a diversified portfolio, because the reason social selling is at the heart of this is because the people that I want to talk to, some of those job titles that I just listed off, we may not have all those relationships yet. So there may be a layer of this that requires my team and I to go out and create that relationship. Well, where are we going to do that? Right? So are we going to email them? Are we going to leverage LinkedIn? Are we going to, find them in some other mechanism? So I think that's the key is, okay, do we have the relationships that we need? Second, it's all about the resourcing. What's the resource that we're going to deliver? What is that compelling event or message or that collateral that we're going to leverage? Who are the people on our side that are going to deliver the content? Or do we leverage one of our wonderful partners? So that's the next element. And then the ways of execution. And so I think, again, and you want to take a diversified approach to each one of them, because I may send out invites via email, but if I don't leverage LinkedIn, to your point, Tom, then I'm shooting myself in the foot. I'm not maximizing the total number of potential attendees and the maximizing the impact. And so where I think my team has really embraced this is starting to look at, okay, hey, how can I start to leverage some of these tools to create the relationships that I didn't already have? How can I engage in different ways? And it's a lot of the stuff that we talk about. It's funny, one of the folks on my team and I today, we were trading messages with each other because we both posted on a comment or made comments on a post of the CEO of one of our largest customers, and we tagged him, this CEO, and he pinged me later in the day. He's like, "Oh, we're both out there doing this," and it's like it's gratifying as a leader to really see that this is resonating, and we're getting meetings because of it. We're sharing these best practices and these stories, and that's how you really develop a winning social selling culture.
Yeah, and
that's huge right there, what you just said, a social selling culture. And you're creating, not only you have content, you have stories, but I also love that I heard you say, Carson, is you had impending events. And so it's how are we sharing this information out? Who are we sharing it with? And I think that constantly having some sort of impending event that you're talking about is key to really help, especially people that aren't as used to using social, give them something to talk about, because too often people go, I want to use social, I want to do this, but I don't know what really is. Tom was saying, you're hitting all three legs of the stool. And by the way, before we keep going, Tom, I know you have a question. Just Mary and I think it's Davin, Brandon, and let's see, Bill. It says LinkedIn user, but Carson told us it's Bill. Thank you guys. I don't know if I missed anybody. Colby up there, and any questions you guys have for Carson, bring it on. Let's put him on the hot seat. Make him answer questions.
Yeah, that's so. One of your pieces of content isn't. Do you have 15 minutes for a demo? That's not what. That's the most common one that I seem to get.
No, that's the beauty of it. I I ask my team that. I'm like, how much time do we spend sometimes trying to demo a solution? Like, let's create our own demand gen. And that's why I went out and found all these leads and then leveraged, these webinar invitations and leveraged LinkedIn to promote these events in order to get people to join these. And so like I'll do my own demo in a webinar and get 300, 400, 500 people to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. But you've built up to that. I mean, I think the great example, right, is you've built up to the point where that demo is actually something that it's the logical thing to be doing at that point, right? It's logically the right thing to do in the journey versus the first communication was, hey, Carson, thanks for connecting. Do you have 15 minutes for a demo? I got to show you my stuff, which seems to be one of the more popular messages I seem to be getting.
That's true. And honestly, I took a very counterintuitive approach, Tom, because when I was an individual contributor, a lot of times what I would hear from customers is, hey, they didn't have, especially as you get outside of certain titles, a lot of sellers do a great job of managing a few really good relationships. But in order to get really strategic deals done, a lot of times you need a swath. You need a lot of the executive stakeholders. And so, I think what I was hearing was that a lot of these executive stakeholders that we wanted to be in the boat with us, we hadn't historically talked to. And so I would hear a lot of that, like we don't have a consistent relationship there, where I would hear like, hey, we're already significantly investing. I don't have budget to do anything else right now. So I took more of a counterintuitive approach with the outreach. And then I also did things that would increase our at-bats, because again, if I'm reaching out to 1, 2, or 5, 10 people in these organizations, it's going to put us a lot more into a position of strength if we are at least creating something that gets us in front of the masses. And that's what my team is doing an amazing job of doing.
So we definitely have some questions. Carson, Brandon, do you want to bring up some of these questions? You ready, Carson?
Yeah.
They're throwing them. They're throwing some fastballs here.
And David, I think I pronounced it right this way. I'm going to get to yours as well, but Jessica's came in first here. Carson, as a manager, what do you value team members that they bring in the process of social selling? Which traits do you find valuable? Great question, Jessica.
Yeah, great question, Jessica. And it's like I always try to say that, your process, their process, everyone's process is going to be very personal to them, because it comes down to what is the outcome I'm trying to achieve? What are the mediums that I'm comfortable with today? And then what am I willing to explore? And so it's been fun to watch, with my team, their eagerness to embrace some of these things. I think from my vantage point, I'm always looking at what are the ideas that they'll bring? And I always try to peel it back too, because it's very easy when you're a seller and you're in the moment and you're doing the day-to-day to get caught up in a lot of the minutia, or to try to execute some of these things quickly without fully baking them. So, my team and I, it's all about being a sounding board. Like, is this hitting the mark? Are these the right relationships? Do we have the right relationships that we need in order to get done what we need to get done this year? And so it's a balance of, making sure that we have the right relationships, and then also the methods and mechanisms that we're using. So the traits that I love most with my team is just that confidence and ability to really navigate the overall relationship with the customer organization, that command and mastery of what are all the resources at their disposal, their comfort level in some of these, sometimes ambiguous situations, and especially to be able to think on the fly. When you work for a big company, or frankly, when you work for any company, there's different competing priorities. There's different things that you are, given and fed, and you have to very quickly figure out, okay, what's going to be my strategy? How do I tackle all of these things? And so I think that's what I've admired most about my team, is that they're eager to embrace new ways of meaningfully connecting with customers, and to embrace new ways of finding success where maybe they have not historically. And I love too, I have to say that something that I love a great deal is when I'll have somebody on my team say something like, hey, celebrating a social selling win. They bring these things to our attention on team calls all the time. We have a session on every team call that's, what did you learn last week? And every time I have somebody say, oh, I got this new connection because of, reaching out on LinkedIn, or I took a creative approach, or I got I had a team link connection on LinkedIn and they introduced me to this person or whatever it is, or I saw some kind of intel. They're getting it, they're grasping it, they're eager to embrace this stuff, and they're sharing it with the team. That's what I love seeing.
You know what I really find interesting there. Sorry, go ahead, Brandon. Do we all stop?
I want to point out for everybody, I want to point out for everybody listening how many times Carson used the word relationship. It's the key to social selling, in my opinion, is how many leads, how many people can I get in front of? That's all part of it. But the main, everything that Carson focuses on, and this is what I really, really appreciate about not just Carson as an individual, but also Carson and the fact that he represents such a large company. Too often, I think when people think of social selling, they think of the quick hits. How quickly can I get this stuff out there and get in front of people? What Tom was talking about earlier about sending messages with asking for 15 minutes for a demo. Everything at the foundation of what Carson does is about relationship. How do I build rapport, connect with people, get in front of them? And in order to do that, he talks about having the right content. And then in order to do that, he talks about how we equip the team and tell stories and share stories so that we can all build relationships. Carson, I know I say that a lot, but brother, I love that about you. And I love that you evangelize that, because I think in this era of digital, too quickly, especially younger sellers or tech sellers or software sellers, the BDRs model, relationship doesn't matter. Just get in front of them. And I think it matters, and it matters a lot. So
yeah, you know, as sellers and as sales managers, we have to get quotas and you know, the concept of getting big deals. We have to get that out of our head, because relationships beget those things. I've never worried about a result a day in my life. And I've been very fortunate to find success in selling. And, you know, even just like one last thought on the question that Jessica had posed. Another thing that I love a lot about my team is that they will raise, where are we stuck? What relationship do we need? And that's when we can really strategize. What relationship do we need? How can we go out and get it? And it may not just be reaching out to one person, that one person that we want the relationship with. It might be reaching out to the, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 people that influence that person as well. And you know, maybe that's how you create that groundswell. But no, you nailed it, Brandon. It is relationships. And I do a lot of my own prospecting too, to executives today. You know, as a leader, you can use your title. I use it all the time. You know, in order, I in my role, I may have an increased capacity to support that customer, and so that helps me in my prospecting.
Well, and what I was going to say, and Brandon, you actually started it, right? The importance of the relationship. I'm going to go one step further and this is a bit unique, Carson. You don't see this all the time, but it's really respecting the ecosystem. So it's not just, hey, I'm going to build a relationship with one person and try and turn that into a home run or whatever. You're really investing in building the relationship with the ecosystem and letting that ecosystem relationship rise all boats, right? If you will, right? The rising tide goes through and that's not normal. I mean, that's not something that everybody does.
That's a great observation, Tom. That was a really good observation to take it.
And you know what's interesting there? So that's a great point that you point out, Tom, is what I've noticed. And I look back, I mean, it's easy to look back and connect dots, right? It's a lot harder to look forward and connect. And I think that's a Steve Jobs quote. But you look back and it's amazing when you look at some of the most strategic, most competitive deals. We had a lot of stakeholders and a lot of very viable projects that we could put into this deal. And that's why those relationships and that's why that ecosystem is so important, because when a compelling event happens, when a deal happens, that's when all the magic gets baked into this thing and everybody gets theirs. So you want to create something that's mutually beneficial for all of the stakeholders, all of the relationships.
Well, and I think going back to Jessica's question, right? What traits are you looking for? I think a key trait would be somebody who does respect that and is willing to do the work to build out the ecosystem. If they're not willing to not only just do it, but see the power of that ecosystem, right? If they can't see that, then they're probably not a good fit for a B2B, especially an enterprise, but a B2B social selling team. Because, and pretty much any B2B sale, right, has multiple stakeholders. There's multiple people involved in the ecosystem. You're working with much, huge deals. So the ecosystem may be bigger, but fundamentally it's the same thing as we're going through. So, all right,
David,
Brandon.
Yeah, I think we get to. I want to honor. David has asked several questions in here,
Yeah.
and so I want to take a little bit of time to go through it. But let's start with the first one he asked, because I think this is the other ones he asked kind of are similar. He's a frontline SDR. He gets warm leads, and sometimes it's easy to fall into the routine of just dialing, emailing, and calling it a day. And he can also get by and hit his quota this way. Sad state of affairs for the way companies are organized is my commentary on that. But he wants to do more. Carson, how do you answer that? What would you do to encourage him with that?
Well, first off, Dave, and I love the fire and the hunger there. And I've worked in a lot of different sales environments. There's different propensities of leads. Years ago, I ran a call center, and that was as running that, I would have to make decisions based on like what leads were we going to call. That was important KPI for me, was understanding the percentages and the probabilities of getting these things done. Now, if you want to do more, I think you want to be very intentional about like what's a win for you. What is the desired outcome? And if it's just having, is it being tops in your organization? Is it, parlaying that success into, a leadership type role, or is it just maximizing your paycheck? Be very intentional about what your desired outcome is. What is your win? I take very much a probability approach. I mean, if you're getting warm leads given to you, that's fantastic, right? Because, a high probability, high propensity lead is where you can certainly, to your point, you can make your goal, you can make your quota. And it absolutely is easy to get into a rhythm, right? But depending on whatever you're trying to do, let's say you want to move up, guess what? If you stand still or somebody else surpasses you when the time comes for that promotion, the other person's going to get it. You got to become the obvious choice for whatever you want to get. Same thing with optimizing your paycheck. I've always been one of those folks that I've tried to gravitate toward two things. One, trying to do literally every single thing I could to leave no stone unturned, leave it all in the field, leave no money sitting out there, right? But then on the flip side of that, it's also about making sure that you are, that you're super intentional with your approach. What are you trying to achieve? You're going to have these higher propensity leads, and it's okay to gravitate toward, what's your batting average? If you get 10 warm leads in a day, how many are you closing? How can I also get better at that piece? So I think if you want to do more, just be very intentional about what your desired outcome is, maximize your process, get as high close rate as you can on the warm leads that you've got, and then start looking at how do you create other warm leads? See, I've been in situations before too, where I've had compelling events that are built in, like we might have a renewal or an upsell that's already out there, but it's not going to get me to my quota. So I have to go out there and I've got to figure out, okay, what are the big home runs that are going to get me there, or the triples and the doubles, and how am I going to go out and create the relationships that I need and the momentum that I need in order to create that deal too. And so I think that's the key element. It's just, look holistically, comprehensively at your playing field, figure out what you want to do, what's a win going to be, and then how do you max that out?
I really love your term, paycheck optimization, or optimizing the paycheck.
No,
we all want
that, we should do a whole episode called paycheck optimization. So,
Carson, you have some great one-liners.
Yeah.
Paycheck optimization is good. And yeah, I love when he talks about increasing his at-bats, increasing his probability for an opportunity. You got some good stuff in there. It's like you're successful doing this or something.
It's really funny because I had a call earlier this week that, somebody reached out to me proactively that is of pretty great stature in our organization. And it kind of was out of the blue. And I was like, I knew what I hoped that it would be, and it was exactly what I wanted to be and more. And it was kind of a like, hey, what could we do together? What could we do? Collaborate, like that they knew of me first off, and that they had seen a lot of the stuff that I was doing out on social, you may not realize in the moment what impact that you're having or what brand you're creating or who is noticing you when you're doing these things. But I try to be super intentional. We embarked, gentlemen, on a challenge. I guess that was about 30 days ago, to post daily, and I've been doing it. And frankly, I've been getting more engagement, lately than I was previously. And it's amazing because people will engage with these things, and again, you never know who is watching, what relationships it might create. And so I say, just keep investing into that well, because you just never know what's going to come out of it. And I have to pinch myself all the time because I'm just a small town guy from the Midwest US. And I've been able to somehow, over time, over a lot of investing, a lot of relationship creating, create a brand that has exceeded my expectations. And I owe a great deal of it to social selling.
And I want to point out for people, what Carson is saying, what practically I would love for people to see about what Carson does. Not only is he consistent, but he has the courage to be himself. He's very authentic. And I'm not saying, when you use words like authentic and be transparent, I mean, it have all these different understandings. I've heard, I've had CEOs or things, well, I'm not going to share with them. No, that's not what we're saying. Just be a human being in social media. Carson goes on and he talks about leadership. Carson will go on and he'll talk about his own struggles. Carson went on when he noticed layoffs were happening and just said, hey, everybody, if there's anything I could do for you, I'm here to help. And this is his genuine heart for people. So number one, when he says words like relationship, he means it. And number two, he's just very much himself. And I think the key to leveraging social media, you're welcome, and thank you for demonstrating that. But the key to really leveraging social, and this is something I want to get better at in 2023 because of the people like Carson that have been demonstrating it, is to be more consistent, but just to be more real. That's the word I'm using, real, because again, authentic and transparent, whatever, but just to be more real of who I am, what I'm thinking, what's going on. And I've shared it before with people. It's like, what do you recognize? What do you observe? What are you struggling with? What are you learning? What do you care about? When you share those things in social media, and get this, even if it has nothing to do with the product you sell, share it anyway, because that's the human heart that people will connect to. And I would venture to say, Carson, a lot of your success in that has come because you shared your heart out there. You've been very authentic and transparent. And people look at the stuff that you publish and go, I like that guy, or I think I could like that guy. And they reach out and they connect or they follow. And then that's where opportunities. So we call it a personal brand, but it takes a strategic and consistent presence to do it. And it all has to start with just be you. Don't try to be someone else. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And there's no grand plan. Like, I literally, a lot of times I just, go out and try to create something that I think might be helpful or, might help somebody that's struggling with something that I've struggled with before. Bill made a comment earlier that I want to point out. And he said, at the heart of every lead, opportunity, or proposal is a bid for connection. And it's true. We all want to connect. We all want to meaningfully connect. Sometimes we just don't know how. And the last thing I'll say is I want to make sure I address Jessica's question that she just posted. Great question, because she spends a lot of her time following customers and interacting with what they're posting and things of that stature to kind of stay at the pulse of what that organization is doing, which is absolutely brilliant, Jessica. The question was, how do you recommend interacting with customers socially that works and getting them to think of you as the person to reach out to? I'll say a couple of things on that thread, Jessica, because I think this is an important one. First off, I love what you're doing. And I think the important thing is that sometimes it's doing it at scale, because I can't control. There's a lot of executives that I'm the same way with. They'll post something, I'll react and respond. I'll make a comment, I'll tag them. I'll even send them a follow-up email referencing what they posted and, offering to have a conversation or offering to bring in resources or executives from our organization that can help guide them through some of the things that they're talking about. But what's my batting average on stuff like that? I mean, a CEO of a very large organization is not necessarily going to email me back immediately just because I liked their LinkedIn post that had thousands of comments and things of that stature. That said, if I do enough of that over time and I have a diversified portfolio of several different executives that I wanted to create relationships with, it's just going to go up. So I think keep thinking about the things that you can control in that, which is the quantity of the people that you're following and that you're commenting on and that you're kind of engaging with, the quality of your outreach. So what are you doing? What are you saying back? What are you posting? And how are you using it, especially from an email perspective? And then lastly, just consistency, continuing to do it over time. You've got a process that works, so don't jettison it if it doesn't give you the results you want. Just keep tweaking, keep evolving, keep scaling. And I think you'll find some success. But let's compare notes. I'd love to hear how that work continues to go.
So let's wrap up today with a question, Carson. Going back to your team, what do you, if you look forward to 2000 for the rest of the year in 2023, what are your plans this year with your team as it relates to social selling, and where would you like to go over the course of the year? So if we're having this conversation next January, what would you want to accomplish, not just from yourself, but with your team as it relates to social?
Yeah, I love that. And thanks everyone for being on. This is a great, lively, engaging dialogue. The most important thing, Tom, is relationships, right? So it's in my mind, success.
I've heard you say that before once or twice.
But success for me, we've got a relationship heat map that we've built out, and it's based around all of the relationships that we need, based on, if we're building some of these strategic relationships, who are the right people within customer organizations to have in the boat with you, and that are going to benefit mostly, and most from the resources that sometimes they're entitled to as a result of their investment with us. Or, as we would build things out and we have new solutions and things like that, what are some of those key relationships? So in my mind, a win is turning that relationship grid as green as possible, which means all those relationships are a go. But it's also about finding and assimilating new ways to connect meaningfully. New tools come out all the time. And, I don't want to leverage my platform today to endorse anything by name or specifically, but continuing to do research on ways that you can meaningfully connect or, get insights before you reach out to customers. I personally use an AI tool that, gives you personality-based results of, by combing their social profiles that might help you in making a more personalized approach. So continuing to look at some of these new tools, I would say continuing to develop better relationships and better processes, that's a win for me in social. Social doesn't have to be an exact science. And I think that's the key element. And I'll say it again, your approach is going to look different than mine and from your colleagues, but everybody can have their own way of doing some of these things, leveraging these tools. But at the heart of it all is creating those winning relationships. And that would be a social selling success for my team and me this year.
Well, and I love the heat map, right? It goes back to what we were talking about, ecosystem, right? Your heat map represents your ecosystem within your companies and even across companies. And if that heat map is becoming more green and you're building those relationships, talk about an exponential opportunity that comes out of that. You talk about that. I would bet you if your heat map goes as green as you're talking about, your revenue is going to be a hockey stick, straight up and vertical from
getting a big deal. Getting a big deal doesn't happen by accident.
Right.
The biggest deal I ever did, I had over 200 first-degree connections in that organization.
Right. No, so it's so different, Brandon. It's so different, right? What Carson's talking about is the focus on relationship, ecosystem, building the relationships, quality. That's so different than I'm going to get, 1,000 MQLs and I'm going to turn that into 500 opportunities with a pipeline. It's a very different culture as we started out in the beginning here. It's a very different culture. And going back to even one of the questions about your team, you have to build a team of people that can embrace that culture. And not every salesperson embraces that culture right now. Right. But I think if you want to be successful, it's going to happen. So
yeah, train this stuff globally. And it amazes me because it isn't swiftly adopted a lot of times. There's some of this stuff's taken me every bit of 9 years to build, and I get it. It's a lot to adopt overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. It's got to be taking a step at a time, doing, and then progress over perfect.
Brandon, any final questions or thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, the thought I was having right there, and I was going to not say it because it was kind of a tangent, but it's a topic for another show. Is what is it going to take some of these companies, right? When we've talked to, and David is an example of this too. He's an SDR, and he kind of said what he does and what he can do to kind of check the box and hit his goals. What's it going to take for some of these companies to take a step back and realize that the model is not efficient, it's not effective, it's not working, and get back to the focus of relationship? That's been something that's been on my mind for several years. I do keep thinking we keep kind of moving in that direction, and I think it's been caused by a lot of pain. But I just keep wondering, when is it going to become more of the norm again instead of the exception?
It all comes down to great leadership. You've got to have the leaders that are willing to create that culture. That's really what it comes down to. Because if you have competing messaging, that's going to kill it.
Yeah, Susan just added executive sponsorship is so critical. Yeah.
So Brandon, I don't know what you think, but should we let Carson be a regular with us as we go forward here? He's been such a good guest. I think we need to.
He's been a great guest.
Having him more as a regular.
I loved having our thumbnail for this episode that had Carson as a co-host and Carson as the guest, and I went, there's two of them.
Yeah.
All right. So
next week there's probably only going to be one.
Okay, that's all right.
All right. Well, great stuff. Thanks, everybody. We have some really good guests, speaking of that, coming up here in the next few weeks. So excited about that. And we'll just keep building on this whole relationship push, because I really do think that is the heart and soul of everything we're doing here. And that's the difference, Brandon, on your social selling sucks, right? Versus social selling rules, which is what you need to have a new shirt on. So, all right, everybody, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Happy social selling.